Hello everybody, my name is Daniel Hill and I welcome this morning Professor Tony Stewart. Hello Tony.
Hello Daniel, great to be with you.
Thank you. Would you like to tell us a little bit about you?
Well, yeah, I'm a professor in public health. I started my career in the NHS in the early 90s. I trained up in public health, eventually becoming a consultant in public health through the non-medical route. I became interested in mental public health. Had some problems with stress. I suffered from stress 3 times in a 2-year period, unfortunately. Had to leave the NHS in that capacity. And one of my friends, who's a doctor, who I went to school with actually, had heard about EFT and trained in it, asked me if I'd like to try it. Now, in public health, one of the very important disciplines is evidence-based healthcare.
Yes.
So I was very into evidence-based things, and I said, of course I don't want to try EFT.
Had you even looked into a little bit of the evidence, or had you done any research online? So where did you get that theory from?
Not really. I just saw it as another complementary therapy,
right.
And my understanding at the time was that there was just no evidence, and it was woo-hoo stuff, and what on earth would I want to be involved in this? But I've got to say, because previously I was able to teach some complementary therapy students who could access some of my master's modules that I was teaching. So we used to have debates, and I always used to say, okay, there's not much evidence for this, or the evidence is rather limited. Would you like to be involved in some research? And we never got round to doing any, but I always felt that I'd like to just do some work there, just to see how effective these are, because something's going on. They used to say to me, well, if there's no evidence, why do my patients keep coming back to me? And I used to reply, well, it's because they're not getting better, are they? But I really wasn't very nice at all. But then I was very anti these things in those days. Yeah. Now, when I experienced EFT, it worked for me, and it worked pretty instantly.
Did your friend work on you?
Yes.
He did, yeah. So
yes,
at least you could trust him.
It was a she, actually.
Oh, so it was your she. Oh, very,
yes.
Okay.
I had to then reappraise, because once you've experienced something and it's worked, now, is it the EFT that worked? Was it my friend's personality? Was it something else? I don't know, but something worked.
Okay.
And I had to go from the place where EFT is a load of rubbish to,
oh.
So being involved in research and in evidence-based healthcare, I thought, why don't we have a look to see what the evidence base is? And when I looked at the studies, there are lots of EFT studies, and there still were at the time, but there were a number of problems. Firstly, EFT can be used for anything, and that meant that the studies were on all sorts of different conditions. So it's very difficult to combine them. You see, if you want to see how effective something is, you have a look at all the studies that have been done. You try to combine them. You try to extract the data, combine the data into one study and analyse it as if it was one big study, which gives you a more accurate estimate of its effectiveness. Okay. But it's like comparing apples and pears. So we couldn't do that. But also, because the studies were very often very small, people were using different measurement scales to collect the data. We couldn't combine those either. So doing a sort of normal systematic review was impossible, and probably still is, though we hope that won't be the case forever. But I just thought, well, there was one study that had used it in the NHS, and it was a randomised controlled trial. That's where you take a group of people who you randomly assign to one treatment, another group who you randomly assign to another one, and you may have other treatment arms, and you follow them up and see how they're doing. But because
was this the 36-person trial that the BBC reported on?
That was a service evaluation.
Right.
That's a different thing.
So it's a different thing. Okay.
Yeah, I spoke to some people in Sandwell and said, how about getting EFT into practice? They had heard of EFT. They had a system there where it was called a wellbeing hub, and members of the public, if you lived in Sandwell, you could just call up the wellbeing hub yourself. You didn't need to be referred by a GP necessarily or somebody else. You could phone up and say, I've looked at your site, I want to try counselling. I want to try laughter yoga. And
for free?
Yes, they could access things. It was very innovative. And they were quite keen on trying different forms of therapy, monitoring them to make sure that they weren't harming anyone, and to see if they were being effective. Ineffective treatments, as far as they could see, were not carried on. But they were quite interested in doing something with EFT. And so I started doing some clinics on a very limited basis.
And you were the man offering that?
I was offering it. That unfortunately made it a little bit of a biased study, because I was the, I was the therapist and I was the researcher. But I tried to be as unbiased as I could, which has problems. But all we wanted to do was to see how effective it could be in that setting. We didn't have the funding or resources to compare it with another therapy in the study, but we just wanted to see, as a feasibility study, really very first steps, how will it go. So I did 3 clinics a week, and
in the evening when you
they were evening clinics and Saturday mornings, so it had to be done outside my day job. What we found was that we were getting quite a lot of people coming. Some of them were using EFT because they tried everything else. They said this is sort of the last thing.
Which is often the case, isn't it?
That's right. But something else I didn't say was that I think one of the reasons that they were able to actually start the service was that I said I would evaluate it.
Right.
And that's very important, because if you're investing in a service, at the end of it, and it was never going to last forever, it was a specific time period at the time. It was only expected to go on for a maximum of a year when we started it.
Right.
So if you're starting a service and you don't evaluate it, at the end you don't know whether it's been any good or not. So we did a service evaluation, and we obtained ethical approval for that, and we asked the clients that we saw to give us informed consent. So we told them about the study, we asked them if they would mind being involved in it, and told them if they didn't want to, that was fine, it wouldn't affect their care, and they could change their mind at any point. We started the service. Within a few months it was getting very crowded, and at one point, perhaps a year in, it was so popular that I'd got 60 people who'd been referred to me who I hadn't even been able to start seeing.
Right.
And we were doing the service evaluation. We did that for 13 months. And the results we got were excellent, to the extent that I re-entered data to make sure that I hadn't made some stupid error, but I hadn't.
In terms of what? That they're conditioned to begin with, or the... Well, I don't understand that bit.
No, I just wondered if I'd written things down wrong, if I'd got the numbers wrong,
What numbers?
Well, I used validated measurement scales.
Oh, okay.
Validated measurement scales is effectively a questionnaire that has been scientifically validated to be able to accurately measure the thing that it says it's going to measure.
So are we basically talking about their lack of peace, that their issues to begin with? We're having...
Yes. For example, the main instrument was called the Core 10, which is a measurement of psychological distress.
Yes. Okay.
And a high score means higher psychological distress.
Yes.
If you score over 10 in core, it means you're a clinical case. That's not a very nice term.
But effectively, yes.
It's a sort of cut-off point. And if you're 9 or under, then that's healthy.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see what the scores were at the start compared to the scores at the end, because you're measuring something and then you're able to say something about it.
Well, and from EFT, this, of course, Gary Craig, which I use a peace list. Every client who comes to see me, I said we make a peace list. We make a peace list on their issues, and we gauge it on a 0 to 10. Now, obviously, yours is even more intricate than that. But effectively, that's the way that we can measure an outcome. Someone comes, some comes with a peace list, and it's 9 out of 10. I had an abortion. It's 8 out of 10. My father used to abuse me. It's sort of, and at the end of the sessions, then we were able to gauge that. And often this is where I'm getting clients coming back 12 months on for testimonials and saying, "So how are you feeling about this? Is it still really low, or is it still gone, or whatever?" And it's gone. That's one of the ways that we can do that. But anyway, sorry I interrupt you.
No, that's fine. When I had entered all the data in and analysed it, we found that people were clinical cases on average at the start, and at the end, on average, they were healthy or normal, whatever you want to say.
Which are the exact line that you used in what went out onto the BBC.
Indeed. So. Indeed. Now, that means that we've got something called clinical significance, because there was a difference between how people were at the start and the end.
Yes.
In fact, I think offhand that at the start, the average score was 20-odd.
Right.
It goes from 0 to 40, so
right.
It started at 20-odd, and at the end it was, I think, 8.7, something like that.
Okay.
It was also, the scores, the difference in scores were also statistically significant, which is important in the health world. And we used other scales, and they showed significance as well.
Yes.
So although it was a small study, there were 30-odd people in it,
yes.
and they were self-selected because they didn't have to do it, and there were other biases.
Yeah.
We still thought that that was worth knowing.
And you saw a couple of hundred people, I think, didn't you?
I saw approximately 200 people. Some of those I only saw once. EFT doesn't suit everyone. There's no therapy that either suits everyone or works for everyone. But on average, as I say, we got excellent results, and I noted that we were that people on average needed only 5 sessions.
Yeah. On my website, I say non-chronic issues can usually be resolved within 5, but with chronic issues that have been going on for quite some time, I still get great results sometimes in 5 sessions with chronic issues.
Well, I had a mixture.
Yeah.
Some of the
I think it depends on client rapport and lots of mitigating,
indeed, and I have to stress, I can't sit here and say yes, it was the EFT that produced the results, because, as you know, there were all sorts of other factors that might have contributed.
Yes.
But all we're saying is we did these clinics, we used EFT and EFT-related techniques, and those are the results we found. With some therapies, you would expect to need many more than 5 sessions.
Yes.
And I thought that was interesting because it sort of pointed towards the fact that it might be cost-effective as well as effective. We need more studies, we need bigger studies,
yes.
We need randomised controlled trials, there's no doubt about it. But this, as I say, was a feasibility study. We just wanted to see how it would be in an NHS context.
Yes. I will put my own bit and say for the last few seconds that I often will see people for 5, but I had counselling for 4 years and that didn't shift me. So what 5 compared to that? I will often see people for 10, 15, 20, sometimes 25 and 30. My longest client is up to about 45 sessions with me.
Same here.
But it's an investment, and it's an investment. I still work on myself. It's an investment in your mind. And if this is the greatest thing that we could ever invest in,
No,
so anyway,
thank
you, and I'll bring it to a close. So thank you very much, Tony.
Thank you. It's great to talk to you, Dan.
Wonderful.
Thank you.